and welcome. I am DEJI360. Well, quite a busy period for the nation's Supreme Court as it has now laid to rest the disputes over the outcomes of the March 2023 governorship elections in 8 states: Lagos, Kano, Zanfara, Ebonyi, Plateau, Abia, Cross River, and Bauchi State. Let's start with the case of Lagos now. After reviewing the decisions of the State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal at the Court of Appeal, the panel led by Justice John Okoro dismissed the appeals brought against the re-election of Babajide Sanwo-Olu and his deputy Obafemi Hamzat by the People's Democratic Party (PDP) and the Labour Party. In the case of the PDP, the case now was struck out for being out of the specified time frame of 180 days to determine such a case at the trial court. As for the Labour Party and Rose Vivor's case, the court ruled that the argument that the Lagos State Deputy Governor did not, ruled now that the Lagos State Deputy Governor actually did not break any law in contesting in the election, even with dual citizenship. On the case of Kano State, the Supreme Court affirmed Abba Yusuf as governor. The panel held that the appeal court, that's the Court of Appeal now, was wrong to have deducted 165,633,000 votes from the 1,019,663 votes from those polled by Yusuf, establishing that the ballot papers were containing those contentious votes now were actually stamped, signed, but not dated. It also ruled that the allegation of the governor not being a member of the NNPP at the time of the election is not sustainable and not the business of the APC. In a similar vein, the Supreme Court reversed the sack of Caleb Mutwang, affirming him as governor of Plateau State. Delivering the judgment, Justice Agim ruled that the issue of primary and congresses is an internal matter of political parties, which both the tribunal and Court of Appeal lacked jurisdiction over. Also in Zanfara State, the Apex Court validated the election of Dauda Lawal of the People's Democratic Party as the Zanfara State Governor, setting aside the decision of the Court of Appeal Abuja, which had declared the governorship election as inconclusive and ordered a rerun in 3 local government areas of the state. In Cross River, Abia, and Ebonyi states, the Apex Court upheld the elections of Basi Otu, Alex Oti, and Frances Nwiferu as governors of the respective states. Legal expert and political affairs analyst Libros Oshoma now joins me to shed more light on some of the rulings of the Apex Court. Libros, thank you very much for coming on the program, and let's dive straight into it. I want us to start with the case of Plateau. It's one case that we discussed here extensively. Give me your take on the way the judgment panned out, because well, we had thought that that the Supreme Court was going to rule along the lines that the Court of Appeal ruled, but it eventually didn't turn out that way.
Yeah, Deji, I would still take my time to read that judgment of the Supreme Court, and because I had wondered and expected that the Supreme Court would go in the line of its previous decision. Remember the previous decision in Zanfara and Rivers State, where in 2019, where the court held that, non-compliance with the timeline for conducting primaries and holding congresses, INEC timetable for conducting primaries and holding congresses was fatal to feeding candidate. And so to that extent, that the candidates so feeded by the PDP then, or the APC, didn't meet the requirement for, the conduct of the election, and so invalidated the candidature of the then APC, and that was what gave Matawali victory in Zanfara, and also ensured that the APC did not have candidate in the election in Rivers State.
Yes.
So, but following the reasoning of the same Supreme Court, I think from the snippet I've gathered, not just the fact that the Supreme Court, the issue of congresses and internal party affairs of the party, but the fact that the Congress that was subsequently conducted, because the first Congress was conducted, was held by the same court to be invalid. and the party was asked to go and conduct a Congress. Yes. And maybe the Supreme Court took cognizance of the subsequent Congress that was conducted, because it is not just a matter of pre-election matter or internal affairs of the party, but it was a matter that Supreme Court had previously dealt with. And so maybe on this issue, the court now recognized the fact, because indeed in Plateau, there was a subsequent Congress that was conducted subsequently, even though to the APC, that Congress was not concluded. And so if you look at the second leg of what the PDP, the Supreme Court is saying now, is the fact that if the party had said, look, Congresses had been concluded and conducted, then it wasn't the business of the APC to dispute that. So I think on that note, they rule in the favor of the governor. But
I'm just trying to reconcile. I'm trying to reconcile this ruling now. I'm trying to reconcile the ruling with the ruling of the Court of Appeal. So those members, those members of the National Assembly who lost their seats, it must be very unfortunate for them then.
Yes,
because this whole thing is confusing.
These are some of the reasons why some persons felt that this was one, first and foremost, this was the reason why governorship election petition, were elevated to terminate at the Supreme Court because of the inconsistencies of judgment coming from the Court of Appeal. So with what had happened now, it is quite unfortunate that candidates, members of the House of Assembly, members of the House of Rep, whose election petition terminated at the Court of Appeal, would have gotten the wrong end of the stake with that judgment, which the Supreme Court today had clearly nullified. So what that means, it's a miscarriage of justice on their part that the election was nullified on a point of law that the Supreme Court had upheld. And also, I would have thought that issues like this would have been dealt with by the Supreme Court before other, Court of Appeal would take a bite on the matter. But if you also look at the Court of Appeal judgment specifically,
it was talking about Plateau, previous rulings of
that Court of Appeal judgment followed the precedent of the Supreme Court had laid down previously before now by the same Supreme Court in Zanfara that I cited and in Rivers. So I wonder what the Supreme Court, what informed this new decision. Maybe, like I said, we'll need to look at the reason d'etat for all of this. And then, because I also do not think, I know as a fact that the Electoral Act in that regard had not changed, drastically.
Absolutely, because, and you're quite right. The Court of Appeal in the ruling for the members of the National Assembly and State Assembly actually cited the decision of the Supreme Court in their ruling. But we just, you can question the wisdom and decision of the Supreme Court. That's what you lawyers say. Now, let's go to Kano State. Would you say it's a surprise? Because you look at it, you look at the way the Court of Appeal handled that case, and you look at the controversies that arose from the ruling of even the State Tribunal. To an extent, you may want to argue it's not a surprise that the Supreme Court would overturn the decision of the lower courts now and, affirmed Governor Yusuf as governor of the state.
Yeah, not a surprise for me, because I remember I had told you that the Court of Appeal erred in fact and in law when they ruled that the governor was not a member of the party, because the same Court of Appeal in the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, the same Court of Appeal sitting as the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal had ruled that the issue of, by virtue of the amendment to the Electoral Act 2022, that the issue of the membership of political party was purely an internal affair of the party, and in that light ruled that Peter Obi was indeed a member of Labour Party. And so when the Court of Appeal ruled against the governor of Kano State, I felt that it was at variance with the decision of the Supreme Court in that matter. Also, coupled with the fact that, if you also remember, the issue of vote deduction, the court, I wonder how the court arrived at, the vote they deducted from the votes of the Kano state governor, because for you to deduct votes, the evidence must be led as to what led to those deductions. There was no evidence of such at the tribunal in the entire judgment, and it was almost as if the tribunal judges and the Court of Appeal concurring just sat down in the comfort of their office and started doing the job of the witnesses.
Well,
so
but,
I think
but,
that was
but the argument
misnomer.
in that case, sorry to interject, the argument was that the ballot papers were not stamped, they were not signed and not dated. But eventually the Supreme Court found out the ballot papers were stamped and signed, but they were not dated.
Even if the ballot papers were not signed, they were not dated. The Electoral Act states clearly that provided that the INEC recognized those ballot papers as ballot papers emanating from the booklet of the ballot papers, and that they are good to go. So remember when we discussed this matter, I had also quoted the provisions of the Electoral Act copiously to say that the Supreme Court and the Court consistently had ruled, and the Electoral Act is clear on that matter, that even if the ballot papers were not dated, provided the INEC that used those ballot papers recognized them as ballot papers that emanated from their booklet, and that they were good to go. So, and that was why even when somebody had asked me today what I expected of Kano, and I had said, look, Kano was going to be, the Supreme Court was going to correct the abnormality. And I also want to use this opportunity to quickly correct some impression in the public that the Supreme Court, that the APC gave the Kano governorship to MPP to avoid the backlash. The law does not work that way.
That's true.
The fact of the matter did not support the decision reached by the Court of Appeal. And that was what the Supreme Court simply corrected. It wasn't as if the APC, people are probably giving the APC more powers than they have. It is not for the APC to decide who wins or loses at the Supreme Court. It's on the strength of the fact pleaded before the court. And from the material evidence placed before the court and the available rule of law, available law, both constitutional and electoral, the position of the law is very clear that what the Court of Appeal simply did was, it had no place in law, which was what the Supreme Court also reiterated today.
Okay, let's look at Zanfara. What's your take on that?
Yeah, Zanfara also, remember, these were the two controversial judgments that we had queried on the ground that declaring the election in those areas inconclusive was way outside the powers or the jurisdiction of the Court of Appeal, and then asking that the INEC reconduct elections in those places. If votes are voided, those votes are like dead votes. They cannot be resurrected. When votes are voided, asking candidates or parties to go back to the pit to reconduct election in areas where votes are voided, for me was also, unknown to law. And it was also, to correct an impression, it wasn't a matter of the ruling party slicing what they can slice and giving orders to the opposition party. It's a matter of law, and that's why, right from time, I think it was after this Justice Ayo Salami's saga, the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, applied for amendment of the law to ensure that, or amendment of the Constitution to ensure that governorship election petition terminates at the Supreme Court. And to a very large extent, you can say, apart from Imo, which is a star point in our electoral jurisprudence, which though some lawyers have also blamed the attitude of INEC on and not the court, apart from Imo, so far, the Supreme Court have been consistent in its interpretation of the provisions of the Electoral Act as regards governorship election. So it's not a question of, we must look for the one to nullify. And all the judgments that have been given so far are consistent with the presidential election petition judgment that were given. These rules have been laid down long ago, and it is just, knowing how to apply them and when to apply them. And that's basically what is happening. It is unfortunate to remember that before now, with the use of card readers, the Supreme Court said it was not part of our laws, and so to that end, those card readers were jettisoned. But now, with the introduction of beavers and IREM, the court recognized the court recognized the usage of beavers for accreditation and IREV as a viewing center. And that so, with the situation where in the cases where IREV is, beavers are not used for accreditation, the court has consistently, and just like in the case of Zanfara, has held that such votes cannot be regarded as valid votes.
Let's talk about the state where you and I are based, Lagos State. Well, in the case of the PDP, the court said that that case was out of time, beyond the 180 days. I'm surprised that would happen. And in the case of Rotsviver and his Labour Party, the court, of course, pointing out that, look, holding dual nationality does not disqualify one from contesting for election in this country, provided that person is a Nigerian by birth.
He's a Nigerian by birth.
Yes. So you want to speak on that?
Yes. You see, DEJI, I think to a very large extent, there should be an end to electoral litigation. I told somebody earlier on that the politicians should learn to accept defeat at the polls. This idea of going to court. I also would want to encourage INEC to ensure that as much as they can to elevate the practice of electoral transparency to a very high level so that it will breed trust in the process. That is what is breeding this attitude of going to court, wasting a lot of money on litigation, fishing for evidence and looking for loopholes to ventilate your frustration on your cases, even when there are none. It is crystal clear that the Electoral Act does not forbid for a governor or somebody from a governor from contesting if you are a Nigerian by birth, whether you hold dual nationality or not. And that if you listen to that matter, if you follow that matter, some of the issues were not even whether he was a Nigerian, the deputy governor was a Nigerian, but that he pledged allegiance in his application for citizenship, that he pledged allegiance to another country. And that disqualifies him from contesting. The issue was not whether he was a Nigerian by birth. Both parties agreed that he was a Nigerian by birth. And then on the issue of the sacrosanct, timeline for electoral matters to be disposed of, some persons will look at it as a technical issue. They say, it's technicality. I've taken time to explain this consistently, that what people understand by technicality in the day-to-day rule, it's the position or is the sacrosanct position of the law in electoral matter. That is why we say they are sui generis. Something that ordinarily would be a technical issue, and they'll say, don't base your decision on technicality in other matters. But for Electoral Act, it is not a technical matter, it is the rule. And that is why, if you are the tribunal, for example, and the 180 days for determining that matter lapse, what we do at the tribunal is to simply apply to court to say that this matter has come to an end. Any step taken now becomes an academic exercise. And so to that extent, parties should shake hands and go back home because the timeline for determining that matter had lapsed. So I wonder why the Court of Appeal did not also notice this fact that matter dragged on beyond 180 days. And once it is beyond 180 days, it's a constitutional point. Any decision taken thereafter becomes an academic exercise and no court can act on it. No superior court can act on it. And that's what the Supreme Court simply has reiterated. It's just like, do you know that if the rule says 21 days within which, after delivery of judgment, within which to file your petition. If you file 1 minute after 12 midnight, because even the petition carries a time stamp, that's why the secretariat of the tribunal is open 24 hours. If you file 1 minute after beyond 12 midnight, 1 minute beyond 12 midnight, you are out of time. You are out of time, and the tribunal will not entertain it. Even if the tribunal entertains it at the end of the day, the Court of Appeal will simply say, on appeal, the matter will be heard to be an academic exercise. And so that's basically what has become of Lagos. So that's why I think that going forward, INEC, first and foremost, should try as much as they can to elevate the process, to enhance transparency, so as to breed trust in the process. So we avoid all of this unnecessary litigation and making millionaires of senior lawyers who are handling election petition matters. And then by extension, because judges also have been accused of, putting their hands in the till, politicians trying to compromise them. If we avoid all of this, we'll be able to build more trust in the process. And it was almost as if on Friday is the main election day for all of this Zanfara, Kano, Plateau, Ebonyi, Abia, Lagos. Meanwhile, election had been conducted 10 months ago. But Friday was the main election day for those states, because a panel of 5 members will sit down and determine, the collective decision taken by the entire population of the state, which, is not helping our democracy.
There's no question at all. Friday, the 12th of January, would remain a very important date for some of these governors, especially those whose cases were heard on that date. And there's no question at all that it's even good that this has come to an end, so that these governors can just go back and concentrate on governance. Because all this while, most of them must have been scared, not knowing what was going to happen. And of course, you made a very strong point. It's very important that we have a reduction in litigation, especially election litigations, because I can't just imagine how much some of these governors have spent, doing this case up to the Supreme Court level. It's a lot of money. And for lawyers like yourself, well, what can I say?
I can tell you that in some of these states, activities have been, at a pause. A lot of the governors have had to pause, governance, consistently looking behind their back, looking, behind their shoulders, to know what is happening, what is going to happen, at the courts, the uncertainty, especially if you're a member of the opposition party. So that's for 10 months after election, and then since May 29th till date, that's about 7 months. If I'm not mistaken. And consistently, decisions that would have been taken, you find the government having to hold on, waiting for the outcome of what will happen at the tribunal. It does not help the development. And then 1 year after now, they start preparing for, election, re-election. It is certainly not too heady for our democracy.
Libros Oshoma, thank you very much for coming on the program. Thank you for elucidating on some of these issues. Thanks a lot, as always.
Always my pleasure, brother. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us, don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.